Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
In Colossians 2, verse 8, the Word of God says that we're to beware of false philosophies that are based not on the Word of God, but on the basic rudimentary things of this world. And the Bible goes on and it says that we are to take every thought captive to Jesus Christ. Hi, Alex McFarland here. We've got a great show, and we're going to be talking about the realm of medicine and healthcare. And as we queue up this topic, I want to say what an honor it is to be on the Hamilton Corner this week. Pastor, attorney, cultural commentator, journalist Abe Hamilton III. He's a colleague and friend, and when he is on the road traveling, frequently I have the privilege, and it is a great honor, to sit in his stead, and tonight is one of those nights. We've had a great week. By the way, I want to mention Wednesday of this week, we had an incredible show with world-renowned scholar Gary Habermas, and I've interviewed Gary Habermas a number of times. I even this morning was getting some emails and phone calls from people who heard my interview on the Hamilton Corner, and they were saying how meaningful it was. And I would encourage you, if you could, go back and listen. That was Wednesday, April 17, 2024, with Gary Habermas. And we've got an equally exciting show today with Katy Talento of the Alliance of Healthcare Ministries, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of medicine, science, healthcare, and the stewardship of our bodies, you know, the Bible talks about in Habakkuk, the day is coming, one day, we're not there yet, but the day is coming when the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. Now, right now, you and I know dozens of belief systems are competing for the hearts and minds of people. 20 years ago, I was working at Focus on the Family with James Dobson, this wonderful man named Dr. Del Tackett, and we were working on a project, a video that would become very big called The Truth Project, and it was basically a biblical worldview resource. And Dr. Del Tackett, he would famously say, look in any direction, 360 degrees, any topic, any subject, and God has spoken. Well, that's true. And I think there are a lot of people today that maybe they are a believer and they've put their faith in Christ to be saved. Wonderful. But they need to know also God has something to say about government. The Bible has something to say about education. The Bible has something to say about medicine and the world around us and healthcare and economics. My goodness, the Bible has a lot to say about economics. The Bible has a lot to say about morality. And in this spirit of taking every thought captive up unto the Lordship of Christ and His Word, we're talking about a fully orbed worldview, a fully orbed biblical approach to life and family. And somebody that I respect so much, we've had the privilege of interviewing Katy Talento quite a number of times. And Katy Talento has just an amazing resume. My goodness, she has distinguished herself in serving our government. She's the executive director of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries. The Alliance, their website, by the way, is ahcsm.org, as in Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries, ahcsm.org. And she's just done so many things. She's an expert voice. In media, we call it an SME, a subject matter expert on health, medicine, pharmaceuticals, insurance, and what the government might be doing right in healthcare, and certainly things that are going wrong. But I've just come to trust her as just a very respected voice of reason and truth in so many areas. And certainly that very important realm that touches all of our lives, which is our health and insurance and healthcare. But Katy Talento, she's so gracious with her time. Thank you for holding, Katy, and welcome to the American Family Radio Network. It's a privilege to have you on.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here with you and this audience.
Well, I want you to give a little background. I've got so much I want to ask you, but give us your journey. How did you come to do all that you do? And now you're the executive director of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries. But how did Katy Talento reach this point in her journey?
Well, as you get older, Alex, that story gets longer, but I'll try to abbreviate it. I came to Christ when I was a teenager through Young Life Ministry, and then kind of went to college and didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a radical, and I kind of got pulled into social science and medicine all at once. I didn't know what that was, but later I figured out, well, the combination of social science and medicine is what we call public health and epidemiology. And so I ended up going to graduate school for epidemiology and studied infectious disease, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, spent some time in Africa. And then I sort of got recruited, kind of drafted into working on Capitol Hill after working in HIV AIDS for a while. And little Republican children back then, and even now, were not growing up wanting to be public health experts. And so there weren't very many out there. And so it's pretty easy to get a job because on Capitol Hill, there has to be someone who does public health for the committee of jurisdiction. And they couldn't find anybody, and it was me. So I kind of, when you're in that kind of situation, you get promoted quickly and you get a lot of responsibility quickly because there just aren't other Republicans that have that subject matter expertise, as you mentioned. So, I was able to do a lot of fun things, and I worked for 5 different senators. I took some time off to spend some time in a convent, actually, in a religious order. And then I also took some time off to work for ExxonMobil and helping protect their workforce. But eventually, there was this crazy guy who stepped off an elevator and said he would run for president. And I was working for a senator from North Carolina at the time. And I had a friend who was working for the Trump campaign, and he was doing policy for the campaign. And I didn't see him for a few months, but when I finally did see him, it was he was haggard, he was chain smoking, and this was a guy who I was really surprised to see that. And I said, well, gosh, what's going on? You look really sleep deprived, and golly, and can I help you? And so that's how it started. He said, yes, please help, I'm dying. And so I started working on healthcare for the Trump campaign. That turned into the platform committee at the RNC convention that year, and then the transition team after then candidate Trump became President-elect Trump, and then eventually into the White House, where I was serving as the special advisor to the president for health policy on the Domestic Policy Council. And that really meant that it was sort of my job to get the president's health agenda and values agenda, that's life and gender and all that, religious liberty, those agendas through, the many, many labyrinthine ways of the deep state and multiple agencies and departments. So that's our job in the White House. And it was, when you work in policy in Washington, doing that job at the White House is sort of like playing in the Super Bowl. So it was really just the greatest. It was so fun. It was wonderfully fun working for a totally fearless leader like President Trump. I always love it when I had bosses like Senator Tom Coburn or Senator Sam Brownback who were fearless in doing the right thing. And Donald Trump was similar. He had different motivations, I think, but he was really fearless, and he just didn't care what blowback he got for doing the right thing. That was really freeing. And so then after I left government right before COVID broke out, actually. Thank God. I would not have wanted to be part of that response. But so, that was during the 2020 campaign. I was helping the 2020 campaign out a little, but ultimately I ended up leaving government and working on healthcare still, price transparency. I help employers develop innovative health plans, especially religious employers. And also I work with healthcare sharing ministries, and healthcare sharing ministries are a non-insurance option. They have a trade association called the Alliance that you mentioned, and I I help direct that trade group. And during COVID, I got a little bit radicalized. I kind of woke up to sort of conventional medicine and how broken it is, and how there are big corporate interests that are kind of allying against us when really the government should be protecting, us from them. Instead, it's the other way around, and they're protecting these corporate interests in healthcare from us.
Sure.
And oversight and the democratic process. And so during that, I started exploring, alternative health and ways that we can protect ourselves outside of that system. And so then during that time, I became a naturopathic doctor and got that credential. So I do all these things. I wear many hats, but all of it relating to healthcare and how we serve God and really pursue truth about our bodies, which are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Amen. Hey, if you're at liberty to respond to this, and if you can't respond to this, I completely understand. But candidate Trump is the presumptive nominee. I think he'll be the nominee for the Republican Party for president in 2024. Have you been approached about a cabinet position again, or is that something you would have an interest in if it were presented to you?
Well, I don't think they're approaching anyone about sort of advisor type positions. I don't think I would want a cabinet position, or I didn't have one. I wouldn't want a cabinet position.
Or an advisor position, I should have said, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. An advisor position, there are very few jobs I would want to do. I have a really great life, but I'm not totally close to it. I think my husband might have something to say about that. He always described it as a military deployment. It's like, okay, mom's gone for 3 years. Like, we'll pray for her.
Yeah.
So it would be hard. It's very hard on the family. And so the Lord would have to call me. And so far, nobody's asking. So it may not even be an issue.
Sure. Let me ask you this. We seem to be a sickly people. Katy, I was a youth pastor for 11 years, and I still do a lot with teenagers. We'll have 1,200 kids in 7 summer camps this year, and it's great. But youth and certainly grown-ups, if I'm speaking out of school, please correct me, but it just seems like people are sickly these days. I mean, it's almost like people spend more time in, physical and, illnesses than healthy, whereas it used to be the inverse of that. I mean, once in a while people would get sick, but 99% of the time people are robust and healthy. And I don't know, I do a lot of traveling. I'm in 30 states a year, hundreds of locations. I've done this for 30 years. It just seems like people are kind of sickly these days. Do you see that?
Absolutely. Americans are the sickest, fattest than we've ever been. And, it's so bad that more than half of our children have a chronic condition. And, something like a third of them have more than one. This is a huge problem. It's changed. It's, something's going on, and it can't be explained by genetics, which takes thousands and thousands of years to change. And it can't be explained, by lifestyle alone, because frankly, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, they ate a lot of butter and meat and fat and, they had raw milk and, there are lots of things that they did that, we're not even doing because we think those things are unhealthy. And so our population is actually eating less sugar than in the past 20 years than we have in the past. So I actually think that there's a lot going on, and it's hard for us to know exactly what's driving this, but there are a number of candidates. Certainly, ultra-processed food I would put as the number one candidate. It's the thing that's changed the most in the past 100 years. And, in terms of our so much of our food today that we're eating, and 2/3 of our calories come from ultra-processed food.
Hold that thought, Katy. Forgive me. We've got a break. We got to take a break. Folks, stay tuned. Your Health, Our Future. More with Katy Talento when we come back. Stay tuned. We've got a brief break here on the American Family Radio Network. Don't go away.
Whether it's a story about prayer in public schools or battles for biblical truth within our denominations, the American Family News Network is here to tell you what the newsmakers are saying.
We are starting to see a rebellion against corporate America's endorsement, coddling of the LGBTQ agenda.
The American Family News Network is comprised of news anchors and editors that team up to bring you news from a Christian perspective.
A TRO, for non-legal types out there, is basically just an emergency order that would have allowed Liam to go back to school wearing the t-shirt he wants to wear. And again, that t-shirt says there are two genders.
Not only can you listen to reports on the radio, but you can also visit afn.net for coverage of the latest headlines.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, out on the campaign trail, was ready with an answer on the meaning of the word woke.
American Family News, reporters you can trust.
My wife, Jan, played in the marching band in high school and then in college. They all had matching uniforms. But when they played the music, nobody played exactly the same thing. As believers, unity of the faith, we're not the same. We're different. We have different parts to play. But there can be unity as we play our part in Christ Jesus.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
Are you being honest and dependable in your personal money matters? Honesty is one of the first things Jesus requires of new believers. When some tax collectors approached Jesus to be baptized, they asked, "Teacher, what shall we do?" And he said to them, "Collect no more than what you have been ordered to." You need to be honest to be effective for God's kingdom work.
Tune in to Faith and Finance with Rob West, weekdays at 9 a.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Have you ever heard that old axiom, early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise? Well, we're going to talk about health and wisdom and truth in this era. Alex McFarland here. Very honored to have Katy Talento, the Alliance of, she's the executive director, by the way, of the Alliance of Healthcare Sharing Ministries, which is such a good option. Katy, I want to talk about the health of people and longevity and just, being robust and ambulatory. But let's talk about healthcare sharing ministries. My wife and I was teaching at a major East Coast university, and we had Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I opted out, and I had to do some explaining and basically had to make a case for it. But my wife and I, and my wife is a nurse, but we, for 10 years, have had a certain healthcare sharing plan, and we love it. We think it's wonderful. We pretty much don't have to. We're blessed to have not a lot of health issues, but I'm a big advocate for the healthcare sharing ministries. I had a friend in California that had a major cancer episode, and over $2 million of expenses, and his Christian healthcare sharing plan paid every penny, and it was great. So I think it's a wonderful option. But for those that may not be aware, explain what a healthcare sharing ministry is and why, I believe, as I do, you think it's a good option.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for that opportunity. And I'm glad to hear that your experience has been so positive. I wish more and more Christians would opt out of insurance as well, because I think increasingly insurance is a conscience-violating vehicle. And we can talk more about that later. But ultimately, what healthcare sharing ministries are is we are communities of Christian believers who come together under the mandate of the second chapter of Acts, where we bear one another's burdens, and we pay our own medical bills until they become a burden. And if they are big enough to be a burden, then you can submit them to the community for sharing. It works very simply. You go to your doctor, you say, "I'm uninsured, I am a member of a healthcare sharing ministry. What is your best cash price?" You get seen and you receive care. You ask for an itemized bill at the end. You upload that itemized bill to the ministry, or you send it to the ministry. The ministry then assigns other members who have committed to share a certain amount every month for the purpose of other members' medical bills. and they tap those members on the shoulder and say, hey, can you please send your monthly contribution to Alex and his family this month? Because they had a bill for whatever, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. And then you, Alex, you'll get checks in the mail or PayPal transfers. Some ministries do it a little bit differently, where they'll take all those contributions from those members and they'll pay the doctor or the hospital directly for you. So each one is a little bit different. Some of them rely more on technology, where it's all kind of automated. Others, it's kind of old school, and you get little notes in the mail. It's very sweet, but in all cases, it's a beautiful alternative model.
It really is, and folks, pray about it, check into it. Like you say, I found the insurance, and this was a decade ago, Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm just only speaking for myself here, but there were certain things that I knew they were a part of that did violate our conscience, and so we opted into a Christian healthcare sharing plan. And let me just say, my wife, as a nurse, she knows this world, and at first she was a little, skeptical of it, and she did the homework, and she picked the plan that we have for 10 years plus been a part of. And let me just say, Katy, with my wife as a nurse, when she finally got on board and she was like, look, this is the right way to go. We're not funding these immoral things that secular insurance is doing. When she got on board, I was like, okay, because she really did the research. And this is something that more and more people need. I'm like you. Secular insurance does things that, as a Christian, are objectionable, and more Christians need to make this decision and make these changes, I think. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, dozens of states, the insurance market is largely regulated at the state level, although the larger employers, their health plans are regulated by the feds. And we've got threats coming at us from both directions. So in the states, dozens of states actually mandate abortion coverage, mandate contraceptive coverage, mandate fertility treatments,
gender
IVF,
reassignment, things like that.
Gender reassignment, absolutely. That's increasing more and more. And so if you live especially in a blue state, your local insurance market is required to fund immorality. And then at the federal level, if you're getting your insurance on the job, as half the country does, and the federal government regulates your health plan, we're starting to see threats there too. So increasingly, for instance, there's a bill in the Senate right now, the United States Senate, that would require all employers that are federally regulated to cover in vitro fertilization, not just for, heterosexual married couples, as some might have less objection to, but for anyone, for gay couples, for transgender people, for the use of commercial surrogates. There's no limitation on how many embryos are created or destroyed, or how many, egg donors, sperm donors. Of course, the sperm donation industry uses masturbation and pornography to achieve their product. So, more and more, we're seeing real threats to our conscience. And the healthcare industry is, the healthcare industry is a product of the faith, right? It was started by nuns and Christian evangelicals. And here we are today, where it's really become a pagan, almost like a pagan temple, where children are sacrificed, where bodies are mutilated, and where lies are told, frankly, about the truth about our bodies, the truth about health, more and more.
Yeah, Katy, forgive me for interrupting, but I was teaching a political science class last fall, and Cosmopolitan magazine, which is an ungodly, horrid publication, but it had this article about a satanic worship service that you could host to coincide with your abortion. And you're right that so much of pagan healthcare has become like this pagan religion thing, and it's about so many things other than just wellness and the well-being of a patient. So there are spiritual dynamics at play, and Christian listener, you need to take these into consideration when you're making your healthcare decisions. I want to get back, before the break, you and I were talking about that we're kind of like sickly. And Katy, let me lay something out. I want you to comment on it. I grew up in the South. I've been around older people my whole life. And I grew up in rural North Carolina. We were a farm family for 68 years, my grandfather, my dad ran an egg business, chickens, eggs, and I was in it too. We had this one particular farm for 88 years. But my point is, my grandfather, hardworking guy till he died in his 80s. My father died at 85 and ran a farm up until days before he passed at 85. And I've just routinely met people that ate scrambled eggs and bacon every morning for breakfast, ate what they wanted, and they lived to well into their 90s. I was just recently speaking in Bedford, Virginia, and I was at a little church. Let me set this up, and I'm going to throw it to you. I was at this church in Bedford, Virginia, and met an interesting guy. He was an attorney, and he was a Sunday school teacher. And he said, I'm starting to slow down. I still go into the office one day a week, and I've taught Sunday school for years and years. And but I don't know, I'm going to slow down a little bit. And I said, sir, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you? Forgive me, but I'm just curious. He said, I'm 101. And I said, God bless you. I guess here's my question. I mean, I've been around a lot of people, and it just seemed like we used to live longer, be more energetic, less visits to the doctor, certainly less medicines. And now, Katy, like we do our summer camps. For 25 years, I've done summer camps. And, we have liability insurance. We always have a nurse on hand, because, if somebody, heaven forbid, somebody gets injured, we got to be ready for it. But here's the thing that really troubles me, and I've watched this happen in running youth camps. My goodness, the medicine that we got to keep track of, it's insane. I'll have 200 kids at a youth camp, and it's like, 75% of them are on some kind of meds. We get these voluminous instructions. There's bottles and pills and whatnot. And I'm like, why are these kids that are 15 should be the picture of health, and they've taken more medicine at 15 than I've taken in my entire life? I'm trying to frame a question here, Katy. Why are we so sickly? Why are we over-medicated? And why do the previous generations that had little or no health care, they were better off? What's going on, Katy Talento?
Well, I think there's so much going on, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember growing up in the 70s and 80s, and there weren't any autistic kids around, right? And the rate of autism at that stage was, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 in the early 70s. And so now it's 1 in 33. And for boys, that's 1 in 20. So something dramatic has changed. And there are a few candidates for consideration and that we need to be investing research dollars in around that. Obviously, if you talk to the autism community, they're going to say it's the vaccine schedule. And there is some reason to think there might be, at least some reason to be concerned. When you and I were growing up, Alex, there were 3 or 4 vaccines. Today, the childhood schedule from 0 to 18 has over 70 doses of 70 shots the kids are getting. And then, so something, and those vaccines, they contain not just the active ingredient, whether it's the attenuated virus or, some other DNA, but also they contain something in the adjuvant, which is the liquid that the active ingredient comes in. It's designed to spur, to sort of insult your immune system so that your immune system reacts. And lots of vaccines have aluminum as that toxin that's designed to inflame your immune system. Flu vaccines still have mercury in them, which is a neurotoxin for which there is no safe exposure level. Yes.
Oh,
so,
my word.
That's one possibility. I seriously doubt that it's only vaccines that's causing autism, or it's only vaccines that are causing our chronic health conditions. I think ultra-processed food is probably a huge factor, as I previously discussed. I mean, if you think about
what is that? If you would define ultra-processed food.
Sorry about that. Yes, ultra-processed food is basically food that is derived from refined flours, refined chemicals. In other words, your great-grandmother would not recognize it as food. Think of a Dorito, right?
Okay.
This is not something that the human animal, the human creature was designed by God to be fueled by. Think if you put turpentine in your car for year after year after year after year, what would happen? Well, that's what we're doing. We're putting, and I'm not just talking about, obvious junk food, like a Dorito or, Oreos. I'm talking about just refined flour. So, just the sandwich bread, is chemically refined flour. It's not as, it's not like we think of it as wheat. It's not, it's far from wheat. But also, ultra-processed food has a type of fat in it, which is absolutely toxic and is starting to be banned in Europe. And that's seed oils, otherwise sanitized and known as vegetable oils in our parlance. So, this is something that the chemical companies did years and years ago when they were looking to find a profitable use for the extra byproduct of petroleum process. And it was the first one was Crisco. And they bleached it and they deodorized it because otherwise it would smell rancid and look like gray cottage cheese. And they put it through all these super chemical processes that oxidize and turn oil rancid. And they called it vegetable oil. And they advertised it to women as, clean housewives and who want to have clean children and modern homes. They use Crisco instead of lard. Lard has been used for generations and centuries and thousands of years. But all of a sudden in the past 100 years, seed oils, not just cottonseed, which is what Crisco is, but canola oil, rapeseed oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, all these oils, which are chemical processes that were used to clean machinery, farm equipment in particular, are now in our food. And they've replaced animal products that, you find in nature, like butter and lard and saturated fat. Tallow, beef tallow is sort of the lard of the cow. Lard is the pig fat, duck fat, and even olive oil can go rancid when it's heated. And yet most of us use olive oil when we're cooking. But you shouldn't. You shouldn't use olive oil. It goes rancid. It's very oxidizable. So you can use it when it's cold on like salad dressing. But when we heat oils, when we heat seed oils, they're not stable at room temperature. That's why they're liquid instead of solid at room temperature. And so they're just easily reactive, and they turn into toxic chemicals in our bodies that attack our vascular system and are largely responsible probably for cardiovascular disease. So, and many other problems. So that's another issue. We could also have glyphosate, which is Roundup. It's pesticides that are put on our food. These are outlawed in many, many other countries. But in our country, the chemical lobby and the big ag lobbying interests have kept them on the market. These are, there's no safe exposure level for these chemicals, and they're linked to many, many of the chronic illnesses that kill us. So that's one issue. Of course.
Forgive me, we've got to take a break. Can you stay with us through another segment, Katy?
Absolutely.
Hang tight. I want to ask you about plastic in the human body, too. This is the Hamilton Corner. Alex McFarland on the American Family Radio Network, our special guest, epidemiologist and health expert, Katy Talento. Stay tuned.
Sadly, as believers, we can be pretty self-centered and selfish about our prayers, praying for I, me, mine. The Lord taught us to pray the Lord's Prayer. It says, our Father, not just simply my Father, but our Father. We need to pray much daily for each other and pray with one another as well. That's so very important for each and every one of us.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekdays at 3 a.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Little did you know that the same legal terminology, the same legal terms that we use today, probable cause, just cause, there's multiple ways to describe it, but David uses that same terminology. How do we know what's just? Well, we know what's just by looking at God's Word. That's where we get our ultimate definition of justice from.
AFA at the Core with Walker Wildman. Weekday afternoons at 1 Central on American Family Radio.
Some guy who claims to be a girl is not science. I'm sorry.
It's not.
You just can't claim to be something that you're not.
No, we don't allow people to choose their ethnicity.
No.
Or their age.
No, I can't say I'm an Eskimo, so provide me with a free igloo. We don't let people do that.
We don't.
You're a male, and you can't claim to be a female, because you're not.
Today's Issues, weekday mornings at 11 Eastern and 10 Central on American Family Radio.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. Alex McFarland here. We're talking with Katy Talento, and she is just one of these people, when you hear her knowledge and wisdom, you're thinking, wow, I am really glad that she's on our team. Katy Talento is the executive director of the Alliance of Health Care Sharing Ministries. The Alliance, and the website there is ahcsm.org. And we're going to rejoin our conversation with Katy. I do want to ask people to please pray. I've got a lot of great stuff going on. My tour schedule is on alexmcfarland.com. And we've got youth camps this summer that we call them Equip. Please pray for that. We'll have 1,200 middle school and high schoolers. We're obviously talking about the gospel and being born again through a personal relationship to Christ. But we're trying to, I'll say it this way, we're trying to woke-proof America's kids. We talk about God and country. We talk about, having a biblical worldview and not believing all of the lies of the culture. And let me just say, folks, you'd be so inspired because teens, man, they respond to this content. They want truth. They want to know what is real and true about God and life and freedom and America. And so there's so much going on. And let me just encourage you to act on these things as a Christian, as a citizen. Be an advocate for biblical worldview, especially as it relates to our culture, our government, and yes, things like your family and your health care. And somebody who is such an inspiring, informative guest, just knowledgeable on so many fronts. It's Katy Talento, and she's with us now. And Katy, before the break, we were talking about just these toxins we put in our body, processed food. And I have to confess, this was a subject years ago. If I heard people talking about processed foods and genetically modified foods, and I sort of would tune it out. But I got to tell you, in my travels, working with families, working with parents and behavioral issues, and yes, autism, which just seems to be exploding, I finally said, okay, something's going on here. And, it's like we are poisoning ourselves to death. And let me just say this, too, about working with youth. Okay, just a month ago, I turned 60. And Katy, I'll tell you, I'll be the first to say the Lord has blessed me. Growing up on a farm, we've worked hard my whole life, and my wife and I are just very active. I'm just going to tell you, I still climb trees, hike, rock climbing, and in all these youth camps, and we've rented camps all over the nation. But, okay, I'm in my 50s at this doing hikes, and I got kids that are 17, 18. We got to stop and let them rest. And here I'm the old guy. I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's, and I'm not bragging or anything. I'm not. The Lord's just, I guess, given us good health. But I've just, I've watched the resilience level go down, energy level go down. It's like, teens through young adults, the energy level is just so often not there. And just anecdotally, I've just watched, like I said at the top of the show, seems like we're just getting sickly in so many places. What we eat plays a role in that, doesn't it, Katy?
Of course. I mean, of course. And I think, when you're talking about autistic children, one of the best remedies that has really helped to improve symptoms of autism is a radical dietary change. And you can talk to the autism community and they'll all say, get your kid off gluten, get your kid off dairy, get your kid off processed food, and you will see a dramatic improvement. Now, that may not be true for everyone. I'm not here giving medical advice, but, that just tells you that something about diet is driving some of these symptoms. Not all of it, maybe. You don't necessarily see every child reverse his or her autism, but you do see many. And so there's something going on there. There were some bug biologists out of Australia, actually, that really discovered something important about how we eat and why we're getting fat. And what they discovered, they started looking at bugs and what they eat, and then they went to bigger and bigger animals trying to get closer and closer to humans, and then they started human trials. And what they found is that every species has a certain requirement, a percent of calories that must be protein, and that every species will continue eating until that protein requirement is satisfied. And so if your food is low in protein, you will continue eating. You will not feel full. You will continue eating. And so as our food becomes less and less nutrient dense, you think about your average diet, your average meal, like Lunchables and, or a processed meat sandwich and two slices of potato bread or Wonder Bread. And then you've got some Doritos and you've got some, pasteurized chocolate milk and, think how little protein is actually in that. And so your child is going to continue eating and consuming more calories until he meets his nutrient requirements. And so as our food loses nutrient density, we're going to get fatter and fatter. And this has been shown in every species, and it's no different for us.
Wow. That is powerful. Do you know that is such an amazing insight? So is one of the keys to fitness and losing fat, making sure that we're getting the right amount of protein in our diet?
Yes, and it certainly needs to be protein that our body is built to process. So I think a lot of people think they hear this and they say, okay, they run out and they buy some synthetic protein powder, which is made of all kinds of chemicals and protein out of peas. No, you eat food the way God intended, the way your great-grandparents ate. And that means eat animals, eat high animals and animal products. And then, of course, there's nothing wrong with vegetables and fruit. Of course, these are, God created them too and created them for our food, as the Bible says. So we should eat them too, but they need to be in a form that our bodies recognize. We are part of nature and we need to eat natural foods. So that doesn't mean you can't, put salt on. In fact, salt, if it's sea salt, can be extremely healthy, and we're desperately in need of it. Table salt is somewhat toxic, but real salt is good. So yeah, we need to be eating. But our big agricultural factory farming industry is kind of ruining even meat for us. So the animals that we eat are extremely stressed. They're sleeping in their own feces. They're jacked up with vaccines and antibiotics and hormones to try to make them fat and delicious, which they often are. But they're killed in a very stressful way. So they're just drowning in cortisol when they die, and that's what we're eating. All of that, and so. This is really scary. And it's another reason why we have to have pasteurization on our dairy products, which kills all the protein content.
And that brings me to another question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is so powerful. And I got to ask you this, because I love milk. I'm a big, big, big milk drinker. But are there things in my gallon of milk that I should be aware of?
Absolutely. There's all kinds of hormone disruptors in the milk. There's, antibiotics. There's vaccine remnants. There's all kinds of things in pasteurized milk, because when you have cows that are living in squalor and stacked on top of each other, they're not happy cows, right?
Yeah.
Cows were made by
not
God
contented cows.
to eat grass. Yeah, they were made by God to eat grass out on the fields. And then, in the winter when there isn't any grass, to eat dry grass, which is hay. And so, and that's how we were designed to get our plant vitamins because, they've been digested and made bioavailable in the four stomachs of the cow. So when we eat a cow, we're getting a lot of plant-based vitamins too. And I'm not necessarily saying that we should all be carnivore, only. In no way am I saying that. Plants and fruits and vegetables are important as well, but they need to be properly prepared. Plants have toxins, and they don't want you to eat their babies, which are the seeds and their fruits. So they put toxins into seeds especially, and wheat is nothing more than a seed. And so it's very indigestible for our stomachs. We don't have four stomachs like a cow does that can digest and ferment. That's what cows' stomachs are doing. So we need to pre-digest our grains, and the best way to do that is through sourdough or sprouting, or soaking. And those are the three ways we can pre-digest grains. So you want to eat organic, I was laughing with you when you were talking how you used to tune out when you heard GMO or organic. I just made fun of organic food all my life. I thought it was hippy-dippy, overpriced nonsense. And boy, when I did a lab test for the glyphosate content in my blood, which is the pesticide that's most commonly used. And I was literally, Alex, off the chart. Like my result was out of the range that's measurable. It was so high. And so organic is not a cure-all. You need much more than that. But organic is a bare minimum to not be drowning in pesticides that are used. And honestly, regenerative farms are the wave of the future. I'm so encouraged by how we're starting to treat our animals right and letting them live the way God designed them and created them to live and eat. And that creates much healthier and nutrient-dense food.
Indeed. And by the way, let me just say this, folks. We had on Exploring the Word, which is our Bible teaching show, we've had a number of questions in recent days about the morality of eating meat. In Acts 10:13, God told Peter, famously, God said, "What I've called clean, don't call unclean." Now listen to this: rise, kill, eat. And I love vegetables. I grew up on a farm. Fruits, vegetables, we're all about that. But we eat meat too. And Katy, as a Christian, isn't it something that in the book of Acts, God told Peter, beef, chicken, fish, rise, kill, eat. God is okay with meat being a part of our diet, isn't he?
Absolutely. And I'm very sympathetic with people who see the cruelty in our industrial agriculture business and think that maybe they should opt out. There is cruelty, and that cruelty is bad for our health for all the reasons I've described. And so, yes, I'm sympathetic with that. I think the answer is this movement of regenerative farmers who are largely Christians and are being driven by their faith to do agriculture in the way God intended and to care for their animals in the way God intended. And in doing so, they redeem the very soil that they own. They redeem the land. So we're losing all our topsoil. And if you regeneratively farm, meaning you have cover crops, the cover crops are fertilized and tilled by the activity of the animals on top of them at certain times of the year. And not only are we regenerating the soil there, and you'll have springy, moist soil that allows for earthworms and microbes and all the things we need that give us vitamins and nutrients, but also we're seeing that it redeems the air. So there's a carbon sequestration process that actually redeems the air above us around that farm. And so of course it's all so beautiful when we exercise our dominion over God's creation in an honorable way, in a way that honors our animals and honors our land. Of course, God will bless it and make it healthy for us.
Amen. This is wonderful. Time fleets away, but I've got to ask you one more question, and I've read a number of articles about microplastics in our bodies. We're drowning in plastic. The deepest part of the world, the Mariana Trench at the bottom of the ocean, there are plastics there. The top of Mount Everest, there are plastics there. And a microplastic, 5 millimeters or less, they're even in our body. Katy, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, when we start talking about the things that have changed over the last 100 years that could explain the dramatic decline of our health and our children's health, plastic is a product that did not exist 100 years ago. This is not something that existed. And now it is literally everything we touch. Even the clothes we're wearing have plastic on them. And so you think about plastic in your underwear, plastic in, everywhere. And these are endocrine disruptors, and they mess with our reproductive systems. And so this could be one of the explanations for the dramatic rise in infertility among women, especially among men. We have seen sperm counts globally, worldwide, cut in half in one generation. And it is terrifying. I mean, this is extinction level sperm count problems. So, I think we often blame, especially in Christian communities. I remember I was single for many years and I wanted to be married. And you always hear this sort of scolding, like, you shouldn't wait so long, or you shouldn't be so picky. And like blaming women for waiting so long, or young people for waiting. Nobody's waiting. Everyone wants to find Mr. or Mrs. Right. But
Katy,
I think this could actually be the reason for infertility.
We've only got a few seconds. Give us a website where people can learn more.
Yes, ahcsm.org, or they can reach me on Twitter at Katy Talento.
God bless you. Folks, God bless you. Stay strong, stay bold. God bless America.